I am absolutely not going to let you walk into 2026 being anxiously attached. So sit down because this is the ultimate masterclass, the only video you will ever need to watch to get to the root of your anxious attachment and heal it once and for all. Hi, my name is Elena. I'm a therapist here in Toronto, and I myself have been an anxiously attached girl for a long time. But earlier this year, I did a lot of work, I did a lot of research, and I healed myself from my anxious attachment style. And now I want to help you do that too. We will be getting into all the nitty gritty details. So sit down, grab a snack, grab a pen and paper, and let's get into it. Just to give you a little background on my credentials, I'm a Master's of Arts in Counseling Psychology and an Honors Bachelor of Science in Forensic Psychology and Biology. And I've been learning about attachment since 2016. And like I mentioned, I've been through this. Everything that I'm going to share with you today is all rooted in research. It's all evidence based, but I'm also going to be sprinkling in my takes and my anecdotal experiences throughout. It's a very big disclaimer. This is meant for educational purposes. This is not a replacement for therapy, okay? There are some topics that we may touch on today that might make you feel a little weird. It might trigger some things from the past. So please go at your own pace. And if you do have any negative experiences, please reach out to a crisis line or to a trusted mental health professional. If you would like to work with me and have a more personalized plan for your anxious attachment, I do offer individual and couples therapy to anyone in Canada. You can email me session or you can comment session down below and I'll reach out to you and we can discuss that. I also offer coaching to anyone worldwide. I'm the founder and owner of Liminal Mind Therapy, and what we do is through evidence-based practice and soul-rooted guidance, we help you reconnect with your inner wisdom, rewire old patterns, and step into the life that you're truly meant to live. So what is anxious attachment? This is described as a relationship that's rooted in fear of abandonment. So Bowlby was one of the pioneers of this attachment research. Anxious attachment presents itself as this intense closeness seeking. The person who's anxious wants connection. They are seeking closeness with others. This is often an infant with a parent, which we'll get into a little bit more. There's heightened emotional sensitivity, so being triggered by little things, being very sensitive to people's emotions, being sensitive to changes in the environment. And there's hypervigilance, which is basically being on edge all the time, having almost like a heightened arousal system. If the best example I can give you is a faulty smoke detector. It'll go off for even the slightest smell. That is kind of what anxious attachment is like. And this is not a personality flaw. This is literally a survival strategy that your nervous system has adapted. The research shows that there's a couple things that do contribute consistently to anxious attachment. And the first is inconsistent caregiving. So too much stimulation and attunement from the caregiver at times, and then not enough engagement at other times. So this could look like, for example, when the baby's crying, the caregiver is constantly picking it up, constantly kissing it, constantly trying to help it at all times, never letting it really like self-regulate or soothe. But it can also look like when the baby's crying, the caregiver just ignores it at other times, right? So it's either too much or it's not enough. There's not really a healthy balance. The second is emotional unpredictability. So the parent can be both cold and warm at the same time. And this makes it confusing for the child to be able to predict their response. And that's a big thing here in anxious attachment. It's where we aren't able to predict what's going to happen with our parent or with our partner or with our friend. And we're just unsure. That's what causes the hypervigilance. We're not sure how they're going to react because there's no consistent behavior from them. The last is poor distress regulation. So for example, a parent could be holding their child close, right? They're holding the child, the child's crying, holding the child close to them, but they're sort of ignoring the child. They're not actually looking at it. They're not actually trying to help it. So yes, part of the child's needs are being met by being held by the parent, but they're not emotionally being regulated or helped or attuned to by that parent. The child then really struggles with managing their distressing emotions and finding a way to regulate. So how does it look like in babies? Because this is where it first forms. So the infant struggles to use both auto and interactive regulation. So auto regulation is when an infant can self-soothe. And you'll hear people talking often, oh, you have to just let them kind of cry on their own, let them soothe themselves. It's important for everyone, babies included, to be able to comfort themselves and soothe themselves. However, with babies who are anxiously attached, they can't. They really struggle with soothing themselves. So if they're left alone crying, they will keep crying, okay? Now, interactive regulation looks like the parent coming in and helping that child and trying to soothe them. But in this case, parents' regulation also doesn't take away the distress. So Ainsworth is a researcher who did a lot of work in attachment. And essentially there's these videos that you can watch where they take a baby and a mom and they put them in a room and they just observe to see what the baby's going to do. And babies who are anxiously attached, they almost never wanted to leave the caregiver. They were always seeking proximity really close to them. And as soon as the caregiver left, they would start crying, okay? They wouldn't be able to auto-regulate, but even when the caregiver came back and picked them up, they still would cry. They would keep crying and they would be very upset. And you could visibly see that the child is not regulating. They're not getting back to a baseline. So that's what it means by they can't do it on their own, but they can't do it with a caregiver either. Kids and teens, it can change a little bit. So what can happen is as you get older, you may live in a very unpredictable environment. This could look like not knowing what your parents are going to do. Maybe they call your name and you're a little bit afraid now. Are they going to yell at me for something? Are they going to potentially hit me? Is everything going to be fine? A lot of times, like I'll hear clients say, oh, my parents, like they used to yell at me, and then the next second they're like hugging me and kissing me, and I was just so confused, right? So having that unpredictable environment can lead a child to having a lot of meltdowns because they are experiencing so many distressing emotions and they don't know how to manage them. Like I mentioned, they may be hypervigilant, they may be a little bit fearful and weary of their parents because they're so hot and cold. One day they're nice, the next day they're mean. One day they're really caring, the next day they don't care. So this could lead the child into almost monitoring the caregiver and their behavior and paying attention to what the caregiver is presenting to them that day. Oh, does dad look angry? Does he look mad? Does mom look like she's not had a good day? Like paying attention to these little cues in their caregiver so that they can modify their behavior in order to not, potentially be yelled at. One of the biggest ways that I see this in my clients and honestly in my own life too is struggling to be emotionally vulnerable and open with your parents, like maybe trying to seek some support from them at times and then they react very poorly, and that itself creates a little bit of anxiety. You're in this weird place of wanting the closeness with the caregiver, like wanting to be closer to your parents and letting them into your world, but then being afraid of their reaction. I think a lot of people recognize this where, like, let's say you try to tell your parents a new idea, or you potentially had like a problem at school and you want to let them in, but then they turn it into like a lecture, or they get super upset at you, or they kind of just like brush you off. That inconsistency is troubling for a youth, right? Because you want that closeness, you want to let your parent into your world and into your life, but when you're not met with that kindness and that gentleness and the ability to express your emotions, it's going to be tricky. But this is where you probably are right now in your adult relationship or in your teen relationship. But anxious attachment style can show up in romantic, platonic, and familial settings, right? Today we're mainly talking about romantic, but it can show up in multiple different areas. So here's how it looks like in adults. First is this fast attachment and idealization. When you are someone who's anxiously attached, it's very easy to idealize your partner. You start to idolize them in a way where they are this amazing person. The example I'm going to give you is very extreme, but it's because I have literally been there and done that. It's as if the person is completely on a pedestal above you. You find little things about them and you just go full force, you go all in. And that's why there's that fast attachment. You could be talking to someone for maybe a few weeks, and all of a sudden you really like them. You really want to be with them. You want the relationship to move at a fast pace. And you idealize that person. You think of them so highly, even if they maybe haven't proven themselves. Second is panic at withdrawal and distance. So people who are anxiously attached are going to notice little cues, and if they notice that their partner is maybe a little bit distant, to give you a more real world example right now, maybe they're not sending you as many reels, or they're not opening your Snapchats, or they are physically distant from you. Next is obsessive thinking. So you probably have experienced yourself spiraling many times when thinking about your partner, thinking about your relationships. For me, this used to come up in just automatically jumping to the worst case scenario and then thinking about all the different possibilities that could happen. For example, let's say my partner doesn't respond. I am now freaking out. Where could they be? What are they doing? Who are they with? Do they not like me anymore? And it just goes into the worst rabbit hole you can possibly think of. Obsessive thinking is a very, very common trait, and it's rooted in the anxiety of just not having control and not knowing what's going to happen. So your brain is essentially looking to piece together anything it can to feel some sort of relief. And that relief may even be like even knowing that something negative might happen gives you more relief than not predicting anything and just sort of letting things play out. The next is a lack of boundaries. So oftentimes when someone is anxiously attached, they have struggled to learn what safe relationships look like. They've struggled to learn what boundaries look like. This can start really early on, where we talked about how sometimes the parent would attune to the child too much, not giving them any space and not giving them any time to really be on their own. So if the parent has been like that with the child and is very overbearing, very helicopter, very in their face all the time, you now as an adult may act like that towards your partners, where you want to be in every single aspect of their life. But this can also mean a lack of boundaries of you not putting any up because you're afraid that if you say, I need this, or I this is what I stand for, the other person is going to leave. In your home environment, you were not allowed or you're not able to successfully put up these boundaries. You probably did a lot of people pleasing tendencies out of fear of abandonment and people leaving you and people mistreating you. So you almost learn to not put up any boundaries and bend over backwards for everyone. And this is one of the worst things about anxious attachment. I know for me, it was so bad at certain points. I tell myself I'm not going to do this anymore, or I'm not going to do that, or this doesn't make me happy. And then I would go and do that exact thing if someone requested it, or if I felt like, my partner really wanted something or needed something and I just didn't it wasn't aligning with what I wanted, I would still do it because I was scared that if I don't, they're going to leave me. Next is extreme emotional reactions. And when I tell you, there was a point in time where I didn't even trust myself of what was going to come out of my mouth, how I was going to react. I would notice this in a lot of anger. I would have a lot of rage, frustration, tears, crying all the time for everything. Every little tiny thing would set me off. Something that shouldn't set off my nervous system so much was now completely breaking through that threshold. And it was becoming so difficult to manage because I didn't know how to regulate. So oftentimes with anxiety, you'll notice very big emotions coming through and you'll notice a difficulty of managing them. And that's where we get into this last point of the need for external regulation. For a lot of people with anxious attachment, this looks like depending and relying on their partners to help them regulate. So because, these as a baby, we never learned how to self-regulate. We couldn't self-soothe, but we also couldn't soothe with our parents. We now struggle with that too. Sometimes you may feel a bit more soothed with your partner if they can help regulate you. And for example, that might look like, you're freaking out over something in the relationship and your partner comes and gives you a hug and tells you it's going to be fine. That can help in the moment, right? But that doesn't actually give you the ability to calm down on your own, which is what we want to get to in here. What I would do is I would basically need my partner to tell me, like, everything's okay, right? Like if I'm freaking out, I need you to calm me down. And that's not really a fair position to put them in. Another way is intrusive behaviors, and this can be very tricky. So there's this whole notion of anxious attachment sort of stemming from a place of like selflessness, a place of a lot extreme love and devotion, but sometimes it can cross into this more quote unquote toxic kind of realm. And the way that we see that is, like I said, through these intrusive behaviors. So this can look like doing things that normally would kind of cross the line, cross certain boundaries. So like maybe looking through your partner's phone to see what they're up to, stalking them on social media. Who are they following? Whose pictures are they liking? Who are they texting right now? Eavesdropping on their conversations. I've heard of people driving, following their partner's location, driving to see where they are, driving past their house to check if they're home, forcing them to let them look through certain messages. I've heard it all, right? And I've done some of those things, and I'm not proud of that. But because that anxiety gets so intense, you feel like, okay, if I can intrude and find something to make me feel better, I will do that. And even if it goes and makes my partner super uncomfortable. Next is inability to distinguish safety. So because these children grew up not really knowing what to expect in their environments, not knowing what's a safe environment or not, they also struggle defining if a relationship is safe or not. And unfortunately, this is why a lot of people with anxious attachment may end up in very toxic or very abusive relationships, because this is almost like the perfect attachment style for people to prey on, because it makes someone so vulnerable. It makes someone so prone to completely almost like throwing away their whole identity in their world and becoming one with their partner, which you can see the codependence in there as well, that it can leave you in a very sticky situation. And it's a dangerous thing to not be able to distinguish if you're in a safe relationship or not. And that's what I help my clients with a lot. Like we literally break down the relationship and say, okay, these are all the things that are happening from a very honest perspective. Is this something that is safe? Is this something that you truly want and desire? And if not, what's a plan that we can make to get you out of it? Codependency that I've seen in anxious attachment is where you want to literally become, it's almost as if you're enmeshing every part of your life with the other person as a safety mechanism, right? Like if you are able to be with them all the time. I see codependency as not being able to really function that well without the partner. So this could look like not being able to make a decision, not wanting to go out and do certain things unless your partner's with you, not feeling confident or comfortable to speak with other people, even friends, right? It's this extreme reliance on the other person where you almost become like too enmeshed with them. I understand that like that's going to happen naturally in relationships to some extent, but healthy relationships are where both partners can have their independence and then they come together to enjoy beautiful memories, not where both people are relying so heavily on each other. And typically, the anxious person is relying more than the non anxious person. There's a frantic pursuit of relief, and we're going to get in this in a lot more detail. But essentially, when we're feeling anxious, we want to do anything that we can to reduce that anxiety. And we will do that in a very frantic way. This could look like your partner doesn't text you back, so you text them a billion times until they do, because you're frantically trying to relieve that anxiety. And in your brain, the anxiety relief will come by your partner texting you back and confirming that everything is okay. This can become very extreme, as I mentioned before, with the intrusive behaviors, because they're so anxious in the moment and they need to find something to reduce that anxiety. I've also seen this be associated with substance use, right? So sometimes if the person is not able to reduce their anxiety, or their partner is not around to help them regulate. A lot of people will regulate with alcohol, with drugs, with self-harm behaviors, whatever they can to reduce that. When I was feeling the most anxious, I needed to do something about it right away. Like, I couldn't even take a step back and let my anxiety process. I just wanted to get rid of it. So I would do whatever it takes. And yes, sometimes I would go to some pretty bad extremes to feel better. Next is a focus on internal states. So the way that I interpret this is, we have an anxious attachment style. We are going to focus a lot on what we're feeling internally. We are going to focus a lot on the negativity that we might feel about the relationship or about this person. We're going to focus on that fear and sadness and anxiety that we have. That almost becomes like our entire world. And I remember at some points in a few of my relationships, I would be living in like this very sad, negative bubble. And I would feel very alone, even though I had a partner with me. And it's because I was so focused on all those internal things that I was kind of like suffering with every day, that I didn't care externally what was going on. It also kind of made me go into like autopilot, because I was not focused on my environment around me. I was so absorbed into the relationship and into how I was feeling and into making sure that everything was going to work, that I just like was letting life pass me by. Final way that it shows up is chasing behaviors. So, kind of with the frantic pursuit of relief and the intrusive behaviors, chasing behaviors are can be defined in multiple ways. I see this in two ways. Number one, when someone is anxiously attached and they are trying to pursue a new relationship, they may extremely chase the other person, as in like trying to define the relationship really early, doing so much and going above and beyond to almost like prove themselves of being worthy. And I've seen this from both men and women, but I see it from women a lot more, where they will do what it takes to like win the man over, because they're anxious about him not wanting to be with her or not wanting to choose her. But these chasing behaviors could also look like, partner needs space and they say, hey, like, I just can't talk right now, or like, this is too overwhelming, I need some space. And the chasing behavior is you not giving them space, you literally physically not going away from them, or not letting them have their moment, and forcing them to sit there and explain things to you or to talk to you, which honestly usually leads to quite a lot of problems in the relationship, and some big ruptures that I've seen. And I've been that person to do that many times. What triggers anxiety and how do we actually cope? So triggers in a relationship could be delayed responses. Your partner's not texting you back, they're not calling you back, maybe they're taking a little bit too long. And the problem is, because we're so analytical, we observe everything. Oh, we notice. Oh, yesterday they texted me within an hour, but now they're taking two. What could they be doing? What could have happened? What could have changed overnight? Nothing, right? The answer is actually nothing, but our brain doesn't let us know that. I think the second is ambiguous communications. This is similar to the first one, where maybe sometimes your partner will be hot, sometimes they're cold, sometimes they're a bit flirty, sometimes they're not, sometimes they want to see you, other times maybe they don't make that effort as known. So it's very ambiguous. It's very confusing. And this is a complete reminder of the childhood, right? How the parents were so ambiguous, how the parents were giving so much uncertainty, because that is what our brain is used to. That is what our brain has almost developed as being normal. We don't realize it, but like, it's our comfort, right? It makes us so anxious, but it's also our comfort, because that's what we know. And until we recognize that we're in this pattern and we are basically reliving the experience we had with our parents, we're going to keep getting so anxious about the way that our partners communicate to us. The next thing is changes in tone. And this can be tone over text, but it can also be tone in person. I'm generally a very like analytical person. I analyze everything. I mean, it's kind of my job. I used to notice very tiny details, Oh, they didn't say I love you tonight, but they said it yesterday. Oh, the way that they kind of picked up the phone was a bit different than how they did it yesterday. Do they hate me now? Do they not want to be with me? Like, do you see the way that I'm jumping to such conclusions? There are so many distorted thinking patterns right there. Not touching on those a lot here right now, but essentially, in cognitive behavioral therapy, we look at distorted thinking a lot. And what it comes to mind for me is like that all or nothing thinking, right? Oh, they didn't reply to me. All right, they must hate me. Like, there's no way. Like, they have to hate me. There's a lot of black and white. There's no gray matter. Oh, they didn't reply to me, they must be cheating, right? Our brain doesn't go into the middle and think, oh, they're probably just at work. It thinks, no, they have to be doing something that's bad right now, or they have to be deciding that they don't want to be with me, or they have to be deciding that they don't like me. So we just catastrophize. We make everything a lot worse than it is, right? That little change in tone becomes, they don't want to be with me anymore, because they answered the phone a little bit drier today than they did yesterday. Another huge trigger is the partner needing space. And this could be like physical space, like genuinely needing to physically be away from you. Also be more of like a symbolic sense of space, right? Like, I just need some space to calm down. I need some space from the relationship. I see this a lot in times of conflict. So when people are having a discussion or an argument in the moment, and one partner says, listen, I need like 5 minutes to calm down, or I can't talk about this right now, the anxious partner will usually go into overdrive and think, no, 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 absolutely not. We need to get to the bottom of this right now, because they know that if they don't find a solution in this very moment, that anxiety is going to send them into overdrive. Whereas the other partner, they're overwhelmed because of that anxiety and whatever else is going on internally for them, that they literally need to have some time to think about it, which is a very good thing to do. It's a very good thing to take a pause and let the emotions, let everything kind of cool down. But unfortunately, for us, for people with anxious attachment, they see that as like a withdrawal. They see that as a potential rupture. It gets even worse if someone says they need space from the relationship. That can be so much more intense. Another trigger is feeling misunderstood. This kind of connects with one of the safety behaviors that I'm going to talk about of over explaining. But when we feel misunderstood by our partners, we feel like they're not seeing us eye to eye. They're not truly understanding where we're coming from. And because they don't understand us, it's more likely that they're not going to want to be with us. Maybe we're too complex for them. Maybe we're too overwhelming. Maybe we're too pushy, whatever it is. And that feeling of them not understanding us is so scary because it leads to, oh my God, are they going to abandon me? The final thing is inconsistency or mixed signals, which is very similar to, the delayed responses, the ambiguous communication. But I'd say inconsistency sometimes is more deliberate. Sometimes you genuinely may be dating someone who is very inconsistent. It might be part of their nature, but it might just be because they don't wish to show you consistency. And that itself is confusing. An anxious person, instead of taking that as a sign of like, okay, maybe this person isn't as interested, or maybe we're just not on the same path, they will look at that as, okay, I need to now step up and do even more so that I can guarantee that this person becomes consistent, which doesn't work. Some safety behaviors, we have over texting or checking in. This is a perfect reaction where your partner's maybe not replying to you, or what are you going to do? You're going to send a couple texts. It's not just a double text, it's a triple text, quadruple text. You send them a reel, they don't respond. Okay, I'm going to send them a couple more reels. You call them, they don't respond. Okay, I'm going to call them a few more times. You just keep checking in. You just keep wanting to see, are they going to respond to me, because you're anxious. And their response will hopefully calm the anxiety down a little bit. Over explaining is a big issue. And this is what I said. It's connected to that feeling misunderstood. I tie it back to childhood. Oftentimes, if you're living in an environment where your parents are quite reactive, and you don't really know what to expect, when you notice yourself getting in trouble, a lot of children will sit there and almost like plead their case and try to explain to their parents why they did something, or why they shouldn't get grounded, or why they shouldn't get the we taken away, whatever it is. So you, from a young age, are almost like conditioned to have to over explain yourself so that you don't get reprimanded by your parents. And this just carries on into adulthood. For me, anytime I felt misunderstood, or maybe I did something that my partner didn't really like, I would sit there and literally write like paragraphs explaining. I would call them and talk their ear off and try to get to the bottom of it, because I was so anxious that by me not explaining and them not understanding something, they're going to leave me. I remember, I think it's the worst time ever. Something happened. I made a really big mistake in one of my relationships, and this in my anxious head felt like a do or die moment. I wrote a 10-page explanation in a span of 25 minutes. I've never done that for any course, through my master's, through my undergrad, through my high school. So you can just tell how bad that anxiety was that day, that it like supercharged me to type that quickly and think that fast. Like, I remember writing that. My brain did not even pause to think about what to say next. That's like 2,500 words straight from my head onto the paper in a span of 25 minutes. So we touched on this a little bit, but people pleasing to secure connection. Because as a kid, you were probably monitoring your parents and making sure that you show up in a way, or you do things in a way where you will be safe in the environment. They won't yell at you. They'll be nice to you. You carry that into your adulthood here. So this might look like doing things for your partner that you may not necessarily be comfortable with, or just really going out of your way to people please, right? Inconveniencing yourself, taking up too much of your time, dedicating so much to them, basically, because you are afraid that if you don't, they're going to leave. And you think that if you do more of this, they will appreciate that more and you'll feel more secure. Guess what? You won't. The next is hyperanalyzing social interaction. So as I kind of mentioned before, we are looking at every little detail: your body language, your tone, your facial expression, the distance of how close you're sitting to us, who you choose to talk to first in the room, who you choose to talk to last in the room. Every little detail you can think of, someone with anxious attachment is probably analyzing it, and it's so exhausting. The last two are pretty similar. It's making themselves small and then suppressing needs to avoid being abandoned. This is belief that if we don't need anything, if we don't want anything, if we are just so easy and so obedient and so, simple, that other people will appreciate that about us and that they will stay and they will love us. And it's probably because our parents made it seem like that, right? They made it seem like if you're just a good kid and you just get good grades and you just listen and you just do what you're told and you just, like stay quiet and, clean your room and do all of that, like, I will not yell at you. I will not hit you. I will not be mad at you. I will be nice to you. It's kind of like you get a good grade, your parents come, they hug you, they kiss you. Get a bad grade, they take out the belt. And sure, not everyone got hit as a child, but even just that yelling, even just that uneasiness from the parent is still showing us that we need to suppress what it is that we need in order to make sure the people around us stay. Our brain is a little bit different with anxious attachment. So, what happens is that our threat response is activated very quickly. We notice really small cues in the environment. This could be like a delayed text, someone's tone shifting, someone seeming a little bit distant. And this is immediately interpreted as disconnection, as withdrawal. And our threat system will then activate very quickly. And what happens is our judgment is impaired. So let's really look at this. So in this example, we have a trigger. Our trigger is going to be we call our partner and we're sent to voicemail. This person's not available at the tone. Beep, leave your message. Here you are panicking now because they haven't answered the phone. What happens is our amygdala assesses our environment for threat. And anytime it sees anything that's potentially threatening, it will sound the alarms. And threat can look like something different for everyone, right? There are natural things that humans are all scared of, right? Like if someone was chasing you with a knife or like a lion was coming towards you, even like spiders, that's something evolutionary that we're scared of. But threat can also be you're sent to voicemail. That in a way signals disconnection. What happens is once these alarms sound, your hypothalamus will release stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones are triggering our fight, flight, or freeze response. And what happens with anxiety is that we usually go into the fight response. The fight response produces a physiological change in our body. This is increased heart rate. So you'll notice your heart start beating faster, chest tightness, it might get a little bit harder to breathe, and then muscle tremors. For me, I have experienced some terrible muscle tremors over the years. Experienced them in times of very, very high anxiety where I'm having like a really difficult conversation with someone, or I'm awaiting a text or a phone call. At very like critical points, it's like a full body experience of shaking, and it's difficult to calm down and regulate from that. That is like just how I've experienced it, but you can experience that in many different ways. You can start getting dizzy. You can have a full blown panic attack at this point. As our body's responding, our hippocampus tries to give us context. So it tries to make sense of the situation. The problem is our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for a lot of functions in our body, but also for rational thought, is impaired. As the hippocampus is trying to give context, the prefrontal cortex isn't actually interpreting that in a very like calm way, and therefore we start panicking. If your prefrontal cortex was not impaired and this didn't cause you any anxiety, you might get sent a voicemail and you'd think, okay, they're busy. That's fine. Let me leave a message. Hey, baby, like whenever you're done work or whatever, call me later, right? And that's fine. And then there's nothing more than that. See, that wouldn't even lead to the threat response. But because the threat response is activated, okay, now we're in a fight response. Our prefrontal cortex is going to probably tell us something that we don't want to hear. And in this case, it's going to be, oh, he must be with another girl. He must be ignoring me. Something bad must have happened. What am I going to do? I'm going to call him 100 times. In these moments, our nervous system is searching for clues of safety, right? That can be like a text back, smile, a positive interaction, right? In this one, it would be, while you're panicking, okay, he calls you back. Even if you get a clue of safety, even if he does call you back, that doesn't mean that your nervous system is immediately going to calm down again. Remember the crying and anxious baby. The crying and anxious baby gets picked up by its mother, but it doesn't get soothed. That doesn't actually make a difference for them. Yes, maybe it relieves the anxiety a bit, but because they can't regulate themselves, they still struggle. So that's what happens. This threat response stays on longer. And I have seen this so many times in my life where I'm freaking out. They pick up the phone and I don't feel any better. It's like 10, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes even longer to feel better. And the worst part is it doesn't ever truly go away because there's the fear that it's going to happen again. And there's the fear that I'm not going to know how to deal with it. There's a couple of core beliefs and behaviors that have been instilled in people with anxious attachment from a young age. These are just a couple that I notice a lot in my clients and also in myself. First is that closeness is unsafe. So it's an interesting thing because there's this inability to trust people, right? Because of the instability that they faced growing up and maybe the chaotic environments that they were in. It leads to that fear of intimacy, but also craving it so much, right? It's why that baby really wants to get into its mother's arms. But then when it does, it's still a little bit weary. It's still a little bit scared. How is she going to react? It's why you really want to talk to your parents when you're a kid and tell them what happened at school, but you're a little bit afraid to do so because they might get mad at you. It's why you want to tell your partner how you're feeling inside, but you don't because you're afraid that they're not going to understand you. Another really big belief is that I am not worthy. A lot of times for these kids growing up, love had to be earned. It wasn't just freely given out. And this can look like parents having positive emotional reactions when the child is doing something good. Okay, they do their chores, I'll give you a hug. You do good in school, we'll buy you, I don't know, a bike. you sit down and you're quiet and you clean up, I won't hit you today. Right. So little things like that, where it seems like you have to perform in order to be loved. But when we really look at it, love should be given freely. And you don't have to be anything other than who you are. You don't have to do anything to be loved. But unfortunately, this belief makes it seem like I need to do so much. And for me, I would see it in the sense of when people liked me and when people were with me. And I did a lot of those chasing behaviors, unfortunately, when I was younger. And I would constantly think, okay, well, if this person likes me, then it's probably because I was doing so much for them. So like I have to just keep doing more to keep proving to them that I'm so worthy. So let me just like go above and beyond for them because obviously that's why they like me. Like you see the thought process? It's really not logical, but that's what made sense to me at the time. It never made sense to me that people might like me because I'm just funny or I'm smart or I'm fun to be around or cool. Like I always thought it was because I'm doing something for them. Another belief is I will be abandoned. So these people with anxious attachment don't trust that people are actually going to stay. Sometimes they'll sabotage their relationships because they want to almost know the outcome. If they feel like someone might leave, they may jump the gun and do it first. Or if someone is, if their partner is going to leave them first, then they just want to know that it's going to happen, right? So they really struggle with believing that people are going to stick around. Another thing they struggle with is feeling impermanence. So, for example, like I have this water bottle here. When I put it out of the frame, you know that the water bottle's still there, right? That's object permanence. We learned that as children. Feeling permanence is I'm here right now in my house, but my parents know that I love them, even though they're not right here right now for me to tell them that, right? When I would be dating people, they would feel confident that I still love them, even if we're not, together right at this very moment. However, people with anxious attachment, if they are not getting reassured, if they're not getting validated, if they're not maybe in a very specific moment with their partner, they will feel like, okay, they don't like me anymore. They don't love me anymore, right? Like if they're not telling me this, then they must not love me. So that feeling impermanence is really tricky because it can lead you to constantly be seeking reassurance, constantly be seeking validation, constantly be depending so much on your partner. It might even lead to you wanting to be with your partner 24/7 so that you can see them at all times. You can remind yourself that, yes, they do like me. The last thing is I need reassurance. And I mean, this ties beautifully into that. So needing reassurance all the time can lead into very obsessive, intrusive behaviors. It can lead to monitoring, right? And I say that in the sense of like monitoring everything your partner's doing, constantly asking them how they feel about you, constantly getting them to explain what they think about you in the relationship and where things are going. It's very exhausting to deal with that, but it's also very exhausting to constantly be searching for it because you start to realize over time that people don't like giving it out because at the end of the day, people who aren't anxious trust in you. They trust that because you're with me, you love me, and you want to be here, right? So they start getting frustrated as to why don't you believe in me? Why don't you believe that I want to be with you? And it just creates a lot of tension. A couple misconceptions here about anxious attachment. First is that anxious equals being needy. And this is not true. Having an anxious attachment style is just a regulation pattern, right? You never really learned how to regulate yourself. Therefore, you are experiencing a lot of anxiety. Yes, certain behaviors can come across as needy, but at the core, that's not what it's about. You need to just act chill. Regulation, like true, genuine regulation, you can't fake it. You can't pretend that you're not having a panic attack. You can't pretend that your body is not trembling right now, right? You need to learn how to actually do that. You're dramatic. No, your nervous system is genuinely signaling that you're in danger. Your nervous system is seeing a missed call and it's activating the same response that would be activated if a killer was chasing you down the street or if like 300 spiders just fell from the sky right now. It's the same thing. Our brain doesn't know the difference. It's solved by getting reassurance. Absolutely not. Reassurance can help you. It can manage the anxiety for a little bit, but true healing requires regulation. These are the things that clicked for me. I was very anxious in two of my relationships, one more than the other for a variety of reasons. And earlier this year, I realized that my anxiety got really bad at certain points and I didn't like who I was becoming with it. I realized that it was no one's job to regulate me because I'm not a baby. I say that in the sense of in my case, I was really much relying on my partners to regulate for me. I was putting so much weight and pressure on them to help me calm down and to help me feel better, but genuinely, it's not their job. This doesn't mean that your partner shouldn't help you at all. And sometimes you are going to co regulate, and that's a good thing, but you cannot place that responsibility on them because, yes, they are not your parent. Right? Your partner will find it challenging to manage if you are obsessive, controlling, and constantly requesting for more access. So for me, I would go through time periods where I am checking Instagram followers. I got so good at one point. I'm like memorizing everyone in the list. I am asking all the time where they are. I want to know where your location is. I want to know who you're talking to. I want to know why you didn't call me back. I want to know every little detail. And it's very intrusive. It's very controlling. I would try to put these like boundaries. No, you can't go here. You can't do this. You can't talk to this person. You can't do that. Those aren't actually good ways to set boundaries. And this was very exhausting for my partners. And that's what I say. You may be overstepping people's boundaries with an excuse that you need to do it to manage your anxiety. And I've actually said similar things like that before. I remember one time I said, oh, well, I'm only like this way because I just like you more than anyone else ever had. Anxiety is not coming from a place of selflessness or showing care. You can genuinely very much deeply care about someone, but I don't think that it's fair to play off our anxiety as, oh, we need you to conform. We need you to do things our way because we're so anxious and like there's no other way, right? It really comes down to you need to find a way to regulate yourself, and that's not the role of the other person. The thing is, though, you may be dating someone that is the sole contributor to your anxiety. I've been in a couple relationships, and in some of them, I have felt absolutely not a single ounce of anxiety ever for a variety of reasons. Usually in those relationships, I just genuinely felt better about myself. So I did notice a little bit of a correlation with that. Sometimes people just don't have the style that you're looking for that you might need. Or if you are someone who shares your needs and shares your boundaries and people keep breaking them over and over, or they just can't meet you there, or you're in very loosely defined relationships where there's going to be a lot of mixed signals, that may be contributing to it, right? If you're someone who values communication and your partner doesn't, how can you have a relationship where you're not anxious, right? Unless you just stop caring about communication. The goal is not to reduce your anxiety so that you don't care about things that are important to you. The goal is to reduce your anxiety so that you can find someone who can give you the things that you want and who's aligned with you. Me being anxiously attached made my relationships emotionally draining. It was exhausting for me to deal with myself, but it was also exhausting for my partners to deal with me. And then that would make me feel really bad and guilty in turn. And then like months would go by where I'm like, what's even going on right now? Like I don't, this is not enjoyable. The last thing is I really didn't like when people were anxiously attached to me. So I had one experience with a partner, and I've had a couple experiences with friends where they would be quite anxious towards me. And I was always very confused because I didn't understand why. I didn't think that I was necessarily doing anything that warranted that type of behavior. And I didn't like their intrusion. I didn't like the fact that they wanted me to do certain things or prove certain things to them, or they were asking me for what I felt like was too much. It made me feel offended a little bit because it was like, oh, well, they just don't trust me. But also it made me feel weird. Like nobody should intrude this hard on my life. And the more anxiety they showed me, the more it pushed me away. And it was interesting because while I didn't appreciate people doing that to me, I was doing so much worse to others. That really clicked for me that I need to do something about it. So I'm going to share one theory with you because we can look at anxiety from so many different ways. But one of my favorite ways to break it down is through emotion focused therapy. So EFT basically says that our anxiety is the secondary emotion. Our anxiety is essentially kind of like the blanket over our primary emotion that's deeper under the surface and it's hidden. It's not able to fully come out. So this is often fear, anger, sadness, frustration. And the way that I'm going to apply it here is this. Your anxiety that you experience in your relationship is most likely connected to some sort of hidden fear, right? That fear is probably connected with your partner leaving. You are not afraid of your partner leaving, right? You are afraid of something deeper than that, which is if your partner leaves, then it's going to validate your poor self worth. If you think really poorly of yourself, right? That you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not cool enough, like I'm nobody wants to stay with me, all of that. If your partner leaves, then it's going to make you feel like, of course, all these things are true because if they weren't, they would stay. It's the fear of the truth. And I say truth very loosely. Majority of those things, most likely all of them are not true. But because we develop such a negative self-image, we just automatically assume that people leaving us, people stepping out of our lives, it has to be because there's something wrong with us. But yes, while you can fear losing the person, it's more fear of losing yourself and proving to yourself that, hey, all these negative things I think about myself are right. I also see it as a lack of trust, right? I don't trust myself enough that if this person decides to leave me, I will know how to manage that. I will know how to pick myself up. I will know how to live with them. I will know how to make myself feel good. I don't trust myself. That's why the anxiety comes up because it's afraid of jumping into an unknown territory where you have no control, where you don't know what to do. I need to ask you though, and this is something that really I needed to take time to think about. You are the ultimate power in your life. You are the ultimate power of your world, of your universe. I'm a huge believer that we are all our own operant power. Why are they on a pedestal? Right? When you put someone on a pedestal, which is something that we do a lot with anxious attachment, We idolize the person. You put them above you. The only way that they can see you is by looking down on you. And you make yourself smaller and smaller and smaller by not communicating anything about your needs, by pushing everything away. So obviously you look up to them, they look down to you. There is always going to be this imbalance. There's always going to be a shift in the dynamic where you feel like they are out of your reach. And they eventually might look down on you and think, well, I don't want to be with this person because they don't have any boundaries. They don't have any self respect. All they do is bring me chaos. Why would I be with them? Right. And I say this in a harsh way, but it's because these are the realizations that I've come to. And I don't want to sugarcoat this for you because I genuinely want to help you. How do we change this? Okay. We do this through a series, and I'm going to give you a very detailed guide. The good thing is this: just because you have been conditioned to have anxious attachment style doesn't mean that you can't change it. You can change your attachment style many times, and you can have multiple ones. That's why I tell you I'm avoidant in certain areas, I'm anxious in certain areas, I'm secure in certain areas. We're going to do this through a series of nervous system regulation where you genuinely get to a point where you're nice and you're calm and you're able to take yourself from very escalated back down. Then we have to do some inner child and parts work and really get to the root of why we are feeling this way. Get to those deep inner core beliefs of who we are and how we show up to others in the world. And then the last thing is putting it into practice and actually developing boundaries and communicating in secure ways to your partners. I built a mini roadmap of how we're going to heal anxious attachment, but I need to let you know this right now. It is not going to be a pretty or easy journey. When you are changing something that has been ingrained in you your entire life, when your nervous system has been literally forged to remain in this anxious threat response time and time again, when your nervous system keeps searching for people who activate it in the same way that you've been used to all your life, making the decision that you don't want that anymore is the first step, but it's going to be a difficult process because now you're stripping yourself of everything that you have once known and you basically need to go full force into something new. And something new can be very scary. There's going to be a time where you're in this in between state, the liminal. That's why I name my practice liminal mind therapy, because we are in that in between so many times. And this in between can feel very weird. You might go through this guide, you might change your relationships, you might cut off your partner, you might feel very different about yourself, but you still might not be ready for that next part of change, right? And you may be stuck in that liminal for some time. For me, it was definitely several months. When new people came into my life, I was very nervous that I would fall back into my old patterns and my old ways. And yes, sometimes I did, but that is normal. That's just how it's going to go. We'll chat more about this as we go through. Okay. Phase one is awareness. In order to change anything, you need to be aware that something is wrong. The key here is making a decision that you do not want to experience these anxious cycles anymore in your life and in your relationships. Okay. This phase requires two things. The first is tracking. You need to pay attention starting today. What is it that's going on in my relationships? What do I say? What do I think? What do I do? You're going to track when you get triggered and what your response is and how the situation played out. And how you're going to do that is through this anxious attachment tracker. So if you go into that guide that I told you, you will find the anxious attachment tracker. It's on an Excel file. Please duplicate the file, make a copy, or download it before you make any changes to it. You can use this every month, right? Or as long as you're going to be in the tracking phase. Say at least the minimum that you want to track is at least a week, but you can track up to a month. Okay. You pick the date, you pick the month and the days. You want to kind of give yourself, how are you feeling today? Take note of any triggers throughout the day. So, was there a situation that triggered you? This can be anything that brought you anxiety, okay? It doesn't have to be an extremely anxious moment. It could be something small, but anything that kind of triggered you, that got you worked up. And then you want to list, did anything help you manage your anxiety in this moment? Or actually, was there anything that you did that helped you maintain the anxiety and make it worse? Be as honest as you can. This is what's going to help you notice any patterns. And if you want to break this down and look at all the patterns that you could be potentially going through in the cycles, you can work with myself or another therapist if you have one to help pinpoint what is going on. You also want to rank your anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10, and slowly you'll be able to realize what is causing you anxiety every day and what things are more triggering and how are you overall feeling in the relationship. The next thing that you need is mindfulness. When you are in these anxious cycles, and I talked about this a bit in the first part, I know for me, I would almost like lose myself in the relationship. I would dedicate so much on making the relationship work. A lot of my time was focused to, being with my partner, talking to them, seeing them, thinking about the relationship, that I wasn't mindful of much else. Everything else in my life was like a blur. So this is why it's very important. My favorite ways to break out of that autopilot. I actually have an entire series of how you can break out of autopilot, which you can go watch on my page. But some of my favorite ways to be more mindful are: number one, go on a walk every day and look very intently at everything. I literally look at the trees, I look at the floor, I look at the houses, I look at the beautiful nature around me, and I'm very intentional on all the details. I want to make sure that I'm being present in the moment. The next thing that helps me a lot is watching in-depth lectures and paying attention. So for example, what you're doing right now, I'll go on YouTube, I'll find a topic that's interesting to me, I take out a pen and paper and I sit there, I put my phone away and I watch the lecture. It just kind of helps me be mindful of what I'm doing. And then meditation. I love meditation. I think anything that you can do in your life to really pay attention to your behaviors and when you are feeling anxious will help you here. So, like I said, phase one can last anywhere between a week to a month. You want to track enough information and gather enough data. With the information that you get in phase one, what I would do is sit down and just look at it, right? Look and see if you can notice any patterns. Look and see if you can notice any cycles. Try to understand what situations are creating more chaos in your life. And the most important thing is look at the behaviors of how you responded, right? Are you doing things that help you or are you doing things that hurt you? So having the understanding and awareness is the first part. Second is stabilization. In order for us to really get deep into healing anxious attachment, we need to regulate our body so that we can actually manage our anxiety. And this can be a very difficult stage because our nervous system has not learned for so long how to regulate itself. So this stage is literally to build the nervous system tools that are going to help reduce the panic response, right? Let me give you a bit of insight. So for me, I got to a point now where my panic response doesn't go off often. Throughout the year, there's been so many things that happened to me, relationships aside, that have basically forced me to expand my threshold, my window of tolerance for anxiety and for negative emotions. So right now, it is quite difficult for me to get to a point where I feel overwhelmed or overworked. Okay. Ultimate goal, it would be amazing to get you to that place too, where you're not even having the response, you're not even having the reaction. However, it can be tricky to get there. So right now, this goal is to not completely eliminate the anxiety from happening, but it's so that when the anxiety does come up, you will know what to do and you'll know how to manage it. Okay. These are the two things that I found very helpful for me. And they're also very helpful in the research. So the first is EFT tapping, which is, in my opinion, and also in the research, one of the most effective ways to clear out big emotions. And it helps us become accepting and comfortable with what we're experiencing and why. The second is grounding tools. This is using a variety of tools in situations of distress and really notice which one regulates you the best. So with EFT tapping, I created this little guide. Okay. This is a guide that you can use anytime you're experiencing big emotions or intrusive thoughts. You can use this EFT tapping sequence as many times as you need. I usually do it for around 5 minutes. I've had some very difficult moments where I've had to do this for over 30 minutes until I felt better. All you need is clean hands and a place free of distraction. So EFT tapping stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And it's this mind body tool that combines gentle tapping on specific acupressure points around your body while acknowledging certain feelings. The goal is to help calm our nervous system, reduce our emotional intensity, and really interrupt the stress response. Read a little bit more about the effectiveness here, but it is a very effective tool, and I really don't want you to knock it before you try it. It does sound a little bit strange, but take it from me, this is something that is super helpful. I have shared this with many of my clients, and they use EFT tapping and they love it. Number one, you have to identify your issue. This can be a thought that you're having or a feeling, right? So for this example, we're going to use my partner is going to leave me. This is the thought that you're having. It's this obsessive, intrusive thought that keeps coming up. Okay. Once you've identified your issue, you want to give it an intensity. Okay. You want to rate it from 1 to 10, 1 being not intense at all, I don't care, 10 being this is so extremely debilitating. We need to know a score so that we can later track for improvement. Okay. Step three, you're going to set up your phrase. So you're going to be focusing on this phrase throughout the EFT sequence. And it's basically meant to really capture that thought and that feeling. So this is the common structure. Even though I have this slash I feel this, and that's the fear or the problem, I deeply and completely accept myself. So for example, even though I'm afraid that my partner will leave me, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay. Next, we get into the sequence. So the EFT tapping sequence is a very methodic tapping at the ends of these meridian points. As you can see in the chart here, we're going to be tapping around certain points. We're going to start with our karate chop point, which is just right here. You want to tap at the side of your hand. You can do it like this. You can do it like this. And you want to say your phrase. Okay. So even though I'm afraid my partner will leave me, I deeply and completely accept myself. And you're going to repeat that 3 times. This is to activate the whole sequence. Next, you're going to run through that entire sequence while you're sprinkling your phrase throughout. So you're going to go, starts at the top of your head, then on your eyebrow, the side of your eye, eye, under your nose, your chin, your collarbone, and then under your arm. You can sprinkle your phrase throughout wherever you feel like it makes sense. After you finish that sequence, you want to pause and then rate your intensity. Okay. So keep note of how much has changed. And here's kind of a general rule of thumb. If you are now at a 4 or below, then congratulations. If you'd like, you can stop here. If you feel like the anxiety or whatever negative emotion you've been having is manageable. If it's at a 5 or above, I'd suggest that you keep going. What we're going to do in the repetition phase is that you're going to run through the entire sequence again, but this time you're going to incorporate a few different phrases. So for example, I'm learning to feel safe. Okay. I'm open to calming my body. I trust in my partner and that they will remain in the relationship. Things like that. I'm open I'm opening my heart to a calm and peaceful relationship. Things that are going to help you feel in alignment. If you want, I suggest you search up Brad Yates on YouTube. He has tapping for almost any topic that you can think of. And I like tapping along with him sometimes. You can go and do that. You can go and create your own phrases, but he has an amazing array of tools and resources for this type of tapping on his YouTube. So after the repetition, do the same thing. Ask yourself the new score, and you can keep repeating this until you've got to a place of calmness. Okay. Next, we have our grounding techniques. So I built this for you with two different categories. Okay. On one side, we have techniques that you can use when you're anxious or overstimulated. This is when you're in that fight or flight, and the goal is to calm you down to baseline. The other side is techniques that you can use when you're numb and disconnected. So when you're in that freeze or fawn, and the goal is to activate you up to baseline. Okay. So I'm not going to go through all of these because they're pretty self-explanatory. What I would suggest for you to do is to go through this list of whatever side you might need and try them out in times of stress. The reason why these techniques work well, for example, the 5 4 3 2 1 grounding, it is acting almost like a shock to your system, and it pulls you out of that anxious loop and spiral because it's forcing you to pay attention to things in your environment, to orient yourself to what's around you. Similar to how on the other side, when we're in like a deeply disconnected phase, right? And sometimes it's just like a complete blur. When we orient with movement, right? Like let's say we're lying in our bed, we feel super numb, we start looking around the room, we start understanding where we are. It's giving our brain a bit more context and reminding us in both situations that, hey, we're here and we're safe. Okay. Box breathing really helps, and you'll notice your heart rate actually getting a bit slower, getting more regulated. The tip skills are from DBT, so to quickly go over them, the temperature change means that in moments of very high arousal, when we do something that's very jarring, that's very drastic, in this case, picking up an ice cube, splashing cold water on your face, maybe going outdoors, it is like a shock to the nervous system. It's also a calming, different sensation, right? It's the same thing with the intense movement. Sometimes in the moment, we just need to like let our emotions get out in some way, and we can do that through shaking out our body, running on the spot, doing jumping jacks. You can do this all for, a minimum of like 15 to 30 seconds. You want it to be intense, short bursts of movement, which will just help with taking everything that we're feeling inside and letting it flow out. Progressive muscle relaxation is nice too because it's a contraction and release of all of our muscles in our body, starting from our shoulders down to our toes. You can go on YouTube and search up progressive muscle relaxation follow alongs. There's so many amazing videos to help with that. I love self-holding. In some of my deepest moments of anxiety, I would take a teddy bear. Okay. I would take a stuffed animal and I would hug it, and I would also hug myself. I would kind of just like pet the stuffed animal. If you have a real animal, even better. And it was just a very calming sensation, and it helped me feel really good. I wanted to include these in here because sometimes our anxiety can go from, feeling super aroused to feeling more disconnected. These are tools that you can use at those times. I'm not going to fully go over them because they may not be as relevant to you right now in these very high anxiety moments, but you may notice these a lot when you're in that mid stage of healing. Okay. So I encourage you to try everything out on this page when you need it and see what works best for you. Before we get to phase 3, I need to let you know that phase 2 is not just a temporary fix, okay? Phase 2 is a constant lifelong process that you may need to be in the sense of having the right tools to manage your emotions, okay? It doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck in this phase of feeling anxious all the time and having to constantly regulate yourself. Like I said, you will eventually get to a point where you're a lot more calm, but these tools are really good to have in your arsenal, in your tool belt for every situation in your life. I cannot stress this enough. You should absolutely not move to phase 3 if you have not found tools in phase 2 to regulate your anxiety. If you have not been able to successfully calm yourself down from, let's say, like a 7 to 10 on the anxiety, on the stress scale, down to like 4 or 5 or even lower, I highly suggest you practice that a little bit more, because here's the problem. When you are in those very high anxious moments, it's like we talked about in the threat response in the last lecture, your brain is not functioning properly. It cannot make good decisions. It cannot make informed decisions. So we cannot move into the next parts of the phase if you are in that very high anxiety area, because phase 3 is about healing and revisiting the past. And we want you to have a very clear mind, a very clear perspective on this so that you can better connect with yourself. Okay. So phase 3 is where we're going to revisit our relationships and our upbringing. Just for a disclaimer, this is all for mental health education. It's not personalized treatment. When you are revisiting the past, you may notice certain things come up that make you feel uncomfortable. You may notice certain memories. You may notice certain feelings. This process is going to probably make you uncomfortable. However, if you find that this is very overwhelming or distressing for you, please take it at your own pace and reach out to a crisis line. It is a very life or death moment, or to a trusted mental health professional that can help walk you through this phase. Okay. I created a past exploration guide, and this worksheet is basically a series of prompts that are going to look at various areas and themes of your life, themes of consistency and safety, right? So, like, what was it like for you growing up? How was your relationship like with your caregivers? The second is like your learned habits. What did you actually learn from your environment? How are your beliefs and assumptions shaped by what you were taught as a child? Then we kind of get into our triggers and patterns. This is to really understand what are those different stories that we tell ourselves. What are different signals that we notice in our bodies when we're stressed? What are the patterns that we notice throughout multiple relationships in our lives? What do we tend to do when we're anxious? What are our behaviors like? Then we get into a little bit of that inner child work where, we want to connect with that younger self and what are they looking for? What is something that they didn't receive that is, coming out here and is distressing to them? Are there any parts of the relationship that you're in now that resemble your past with your caregivers? And then we look at future directions. What is it that we need now? What is it that we can do differently going forward? So go into the guide and access and do these prompts. The way that I did them, and I included some of the prompts that I asked myself in here. And what I would do is sit there, calm, nice space in my room with my journal or with my memo, like note memo app. And I would ask myself questions and just talk to myself. I also did this with my therapist. Okay. And I would go in there and try to understand things better. I looked at certain situations, and honestly, I'm not gonna lie, like doing that inner child work was quite emotional for me. The way that I did it was I just thought about certain parts of my life where that anxiety really showed up, and I visualize myself being with that younger version of me and just hugging her and comforting her and forgiving her and having her forgive me too. This can be a very distressing thing to do on your own. So please, if you do not feel comfortable or in a good mental state to do this, I absolutely do not recommend to try this out on your own. Please reach out to a mental health professional. The goal here is to get you to understand where this is all coming from and reconnecting with those parts of you that are finding themselves in this anxious cycle. And you may realize at this point that your partner in your relationship is a complete like image of your parents, of the love that you wanted from them. This guide is not focused on changing the relationship that you have with your partner, especially if there's someone who's avoidant or deciding if this is the right person for you or not. This guide is really meant for you to heal yourself. Those are things that we can talk about in future lectures, but it is something that you may recognize as you go through this. Phase three can take a while because it can be very exhausting to go through a lot of those prompts. Also, disconnect with old beliefs and old ideologies. But phase three is necessary in order to move to phase four, right? Because number one, we need to be aware. Number two, we need to be at a place where we can manage our anxiety a lot better and regulate. And then number three, we need to understand ourselves and who we are internally and what has shaped the current circumstances and outcomes of our life. And then we get into phase four, which is the repatterning. Okay. Phase four, you are now going to create new neural networks. This is the whole process of neuroplasticity. Just because you have anxious attachment right now doesn't mean that you always will. And the reason is because our brain is amazing. It can completely change and restructure itself. And neuroplasticity is the process of your brain creating new neural networks and strengthening them. So, the way that this is going to work is as you practice these new things, as you create new beliefs, as you let go, as you become better at managing your anxiety, all of your old neural networks, which are, made up of so many different parts of information that then influence your thoughts, that influence your behaviors, that influence everything, you're not using those as much anymore because now you're using these new tools that you've just learned. What happens in your brain when neural networks are not used often is that they will slowly become weaker. The signals won't fire there more often, and eventually they'll be pruned out, which is basically your brain's way of cleaning up the debris. What happens then is the networks that you're using a lot. So this is, for example, you're practicing your regulation skills. You're able to identify when something is a trigger from the past. You're getting into the next stage here, which is shifting your core beliefs. You're doing all of that over and over. Great. These networks are going to be strengthened. Your brain is physically going to change inside to make it easier for you to be more secure and less anxious. The first part in this is the core beliefs and values work. As we talked about in the first lecture, there are certain core beliefs that people with anxious attachment hold. And what we need to do is completely change and shift those. And then we're going to go into a complete identity shift. The root of healing your anxious attachment is healing yourself. It's healing the relationship and the identity that you hold of yourself. And the first step is through this core belief restructuring. Okay, so this is a worksheet that you're going to access. And the first part is to identify the core belief. So you want to think of a moment that triggered anxiety, that fear of maybe losing someone. Okay, so think of that situation. From there, think about what was uncomfortable. What was an uncomfortable belief that surfaced? Maybe, I'm too much, or people leave me, or, I have to earn love. This is a belief. It's not just a thought. It's like a very core belief and assumption that you have. Let's use the belief of love has to be earned. Okay. I have to perform for love. When you think about this, ask yourself, where do I feel this in my body? A lot of my beliefs, I would feel at like the pit of my stomach, and they would make me feel so uncomfortable. It was like this weird sensation of like, I know that this doesn't align with me, but I'm thinking it. And it would make me feel like physically sick to think that way about myself. Next, you want to label the pattern. So here I gave you a list of categories of where this belief will fit into. And the key here is that you're going to redo this practice for every major core belief you have that's related to your anxiety. Okay. You will notice after a couple times, what are the patterns? What are the categories that you are mainly putting these beliefs into? So if we are looking at the belief of, I have to earn love, I would put this in the not good enough and unworthy category. Yes, it does bleed into others, but just for simplicity's sake, that's where we're going to link it. Okay. Next is the link to the past. So when do I remember feeling this way before? You want to ask yourself, and you've probably already done some of the work in phase three, in my childhood, maybe with my caregivers and maybe in my school, like where did I feel like I had to perform for love? Whatever belief you have, think about where this was really ingrained in you. Maybe someone genuinely told you that. Maybe someone told you you're not worthy. Maybe they told you that you're very difficult to love. Maybe they told you that you're never going to find someone that wants to be with you, right? So try to pick up on where this belief came from. And then what did the younger you learn from those experiences, right? So with our example of I love needs to be earned, like I need to work hard for it, it learned that you need to put on a show, you need to perform, you need to basically change yourself to fit the image of what someone else wants so that you can be loved. Then you want to go through these series of prompts to really break down that belief. We want to challenge it. We want to basically put that belief into the boxing match and let it go and fight against all of these prompts. For example, some of the things here are like, are there current problems that you're having that this belief is based on? For example, like, have I lost something that's important to my self worth that is then come further exacerbating this belief? Talk yourself through all these and try to challenge yourself with these beliefs. Next, we're going to create a secure reframe. So the secure belief should feel grounded. It should feel possible and supportive. It can't be forced. It's something that you want to like, forcefully convince yourself of. It should be something that makes sense to you. This is exactly how we're going to do it. So first you want to rate how much you believe this, okay? How much you believe it right now, how much you believe it when it's most convincing, and then how much you believe it when it's least convincing. From there, we need to rebalance it a little bit. For example, love has to be earned can be love can be freely given to me just by me existing. Okay. I can be valued without overgiving. I deserve consistency and clarity. These are very gentle reframes. These are reframes that anyone can very much believe because they're true. You could use this little matrix table where you pick out evidence for the old belief. This is the stuff right now in your life that's keeping you stuck in this belief. And you want to look at that evidence and reframe it. Our belief is that, love has to be earned. Let's say the evidence is, well, my ex is only likes me because I just tried to be so funny and so calm all and so funny and so cool all the time. Okay. You can reframe that evidence by looking at it in a different way. Okay, sure. While I maybe sometimes was putting on an extra show of myself and doing a bit more than what I could, there are some moments where I couldn't do that. And in those moments, those people still love me. Maybe while in my relationships, it's felt like love has to be earned. I know in my friendships, it's not like that. I know that my friends very much love me wholeheartedly without me having to be anyone that I'm not. Now let's look at the reframe belief, okay? Go into your life and pick out evidence from the past that makes it feel true, okay? So if our reframe belief is that love can be given to me freely just by me existing, okay, cool. Evidence from the past. Oh, look at my friends. My friends love me so much just for me being me. Oh, remember there was this guy that had a crush on me and I never even did anything. I never even liked him and he was so head over heels for me. Oh, okay, cool. It must be because love was given to me freely without me having to do anything for it. Point out to yourself, what are you going to look for in the future to help you with this belief? It's going to look very different for every single belief, but the evidence for the reframe belief in this case would be in future situations with partners. I will look for them when they compliment something that I know is very dear and near and true to me, right? Like if they give me a compliment about my personality, something that I know is part of who I actually am and not part of maybe a persona that I'm trying to put forward, that will help me recognize that yes, my belief is true. Then you want to go ahead and rate this new belief. Now how much do you believe the old belief? How much do you believe the new belief? The last part is to practice it because you can believe all these new things, but what's really going to help you is practicing it. Okay. So what you want to do is choose a small action that's going to help you be aligned with this belief. So for example, that we've been using, this may be pausing before seeking reassurance, right? You may be seeking reassurance all the time because you are not authentically showing up in your relationship and you just want to make sure that the version of you you're giving to someone else is what they want. But here's maybe where you'll take a little bit of a pause and recognize, okay, first, am I showing up as me, as the real version of me. And if I am going to ask for reassurance, is it for the reassurance that I want for who I actually am, or for this persona that maybe I'm putting towards someone else? A small action that I would do with this belief is, let's say you have been so ingrained to perform for love, right? And do so many things. I would literally pick one thing and just stop doing it. Let's say in your pursuit, you're going out of your way to not express that you like a certain type of music to your partner, okay? Because you're afraid that if they know you like that type of music, they might not like you. So you pretend to like the music that they like, okay? A small step would be letting your music play and showing it to your partner, being okay with whatever they say about it. I took these examples from the Center for Clinical Interventions. These are examples of the core belief and what actions you can take to strengthen that belief. So use this as a template or as a guide for you if you need to find a specific action. This is going to look so different based on the belief that you are trying to challenge. It's really important to take the action. This is why when I said in phase one, the awareness and the monitoring is so important. You don't have to stop tracking just in phase one, right? You can be tracking while you're doing all these things and seeing like, okay, now that I'm shifting my core beliefs, what is happening in my relationships? Am I noticing that things are different? Am I noticing that I'm getting triggered as much? Am I noticing maybe different situations are feeling weird to me now, right? By also you being more mindful, you will be able to check in with yourself and say, hey, am I taking the action towards making this new core belief a reality? For me, I had to go in and really change a lot of my beliefs of how I viewed myself in relation to others, and also how I viewed men as a whole. I had so many negative beliefs about men. I did a couple things. My first aligned action was to stop watching content that spoke very poorly about men. Okay. I also started watching content that spoke better about how to really uplift yourself as a woman and what it is that you should be looking out for in your relationships. What goes hand in hand with our core belief work is values work. This is a values guide from Psychology Tools that I absolutely love. What this exercise gets you to do is look at your values, from family to parenting to friendships to recreation to spirituality to everything. And the reason why values is so important, two things. Number one, it helps you understand yourself better. And I think a lot of times we don't actually sit there and go through what our values are and what actually matters to us. Number two, while you're in this entire healing process, you may recognize that the values you have don't actually align with your partner. When we are anxiously attached, and I'll say this from experience, we oftentimes don't care about a lot of the details that we should care about. We fixated on someone, we want their love, we want their attention. It doesn't matter if they're not a good person in our eyes. It doesn't matter if they have the same values as us. It doesn't matter if we're compatible or not. It doesn't matter if they treat us well or not. What matters is that we can win over their love, because it is going to fill this void that we have from our childhood for the love and consistency that we didn't get from our parents. Okay. When you start healing past that and you recognize, I don't want to be in a cycle like this, you may come to the conclusion that I don't want to be in this current relationship. And something that will help you is to analyze what you value in comparison with your partner. While this guide is not about dealing with the relationship in particular, knowing your values will also help you shift your identity. Okay. And that's what we're going to get into next. There is this creator, okay? I'm going to put up his video right here. And he basically broke down how we look at our identity. He basically broke down something that was honestly very revolutionary to me. Okay, so here is us, okay? Our thoughts influence our actions, okay? Our actions are shaped by our values. Our values are shaped by our arousal template. This is basically like what gets us going. It's more like in a sexual nature, but it's also just like from an evolutionary perspective, what gets humans, what gets us particularly going. And that is all connected into our inner identity, okay? You may be living right now in the world identifying as an anxious, attached person who is never good enough for others, who is always getting cheated on, who is always getting played, who is never the priority, who's just kicked to the curb all the time. And that's why I say values are so important. You may be valuing really amazing, important things, but because your identity is so ingrained into this anxiety mode, you're not actually taking those values into consideration. If you're someone who really values healthy communication, but your partner doesn't communicate with you at all, then you're going against yourself, essentially, right? What happens then is you're living from this identity of anxiety. Your actions are all going to be based on the wrong things now because your true values aren't coming out, right? So now your actions are all based on this core identity of no one loves me, no one's going to be there for me, everyone's going to leave me. So that's how we get into what we talked about in the first lecture, all of those very anxiety driven behaviors, the possessiveness, the controlling nature, the chasing behaviors, the frantic pursuit of relief, the over checking, the over explaining, all of those things. And then that all influences our thoughts. And we're going to think such negative, terrible things about ourselves. In order to really get to the core of anxious attachment, you need to shift who you are. I do not want you to identify in this world anymore as someone who is anxiously attached, okay? I don't want you to identify in this world as someone who is not good enough for others, as someone who is always being cheated on, as someone who is never the top priority, because the way that you identify will inevitably be the way that the world sees you, okay? This here is how I completely shifted my identity. I'm give you a lot of my own personal examples because this was the true key. Everything we did from phases 1 to 4 so far were the almost like the precipitants, the building blocks. But this a complete identity shift is what absolutely broke through everything for me. Because I mentioned before, what happens in anxious attachment is in these relationships is that we lose ourselves. It's a complete loss of your own identity and who you are because your identity becomes linked with this other person not being there for you the way that you need them to. You're not feeling secure with them in your life, okay? The identity shift is important because it doesn't matter how anyone else responds or reacts to you outside of it. All it matters is what you feel about you. So, step one is to define what you truly want. There's a video from a creator, Katie Clark, which I love. I've shown it to a lot of my clients. It has absolutely helped them to shift into a different stage of their life. And I'm going to link that too. Step one is to define what you want. What I did was I sat there, I took a pen and paper, and I decided, okay, what is in my wildest dream, the life that I can have a year from now, okay? And I want you to be unrealistic. It doesn't matter. Describe your career, describe your life, describe your relationship, describe your house, describe whatever it is, your confidence, your daily routine, whatever it is. When I did this, I went to such detail. What groceries would I be buying at the store? And please try to focus on you. This is about the life that you're going to be living. It's not the life that you're necessarily living with your partner. Sure, they can be part of it, but this is mainly for you. Number two, you need to build a profile of this future version of you. So now that we identify what the life looks like, how do they feel about themselves? How do others see them? Like how do they think about themselves? I knew for me, this aspiring version that I wanted to be was not sitting there and looking in the mirror and feeling like they're not worthy, that like nobody's gonna want them, that their partner's probably gonna go out and find someone better or that their partner doesn't find them attractive or whatever. I knew that this future version had to be so confident, so put together in every aspect of their life, so radiant, so self assured that it wouldn't even matter what the other people thought of them. But I also envisioned that, like, okay, if that was the future version of me, then that means other people also saw that in them. So that means other people saw me as someone who was, magnetic, someone who was a leader, someone who was very interesting, someone who is very calm, very self assured. So connect this with the anxious traits that you might be feeling right now. What are some of those opposite things that future you would be experiencing? And this is where we're going to identify all those core traits. Okay. So list all those traits, right? So I knew my future me was so disciplined, was so organized. She was very kind. She was consistent. She was loyal, honest, confident, committed. She had dreams and visions. So she was hardworking. She was a visionary. She was so secure. She was so loved. She was so cherished. She was very calm and sure of who she was. So identify all those traits. And you want to compare that to your current self. And this may be a little bit uncomfortable to do because you need to be honest. Don't judge yourself, okay? There's no judgment in this entire process, right? This is all about self forgiveness. I remember when I was doing this and I started writing down some traits that I had right now that were kind of keeping me stuck in this anxious cycle and keeping me stuck in this really negative mindset of how others viewed me, especially men. I started feeling really sad because I thought about that younger version of me and like, damn, like I'm thinking these negative things. It's not just about me right now, but I'm thinking these negative things about you. That's why I say it's all about self forgiveness. I was able to forgive myself for getting myself in this type of situation, but also forgiving my past version of me, but also forgiving the past version of me, and also just forgiving my parents too, of like, they didn't know any better. And if they did, they would probably do that. So in this stage, we want to see what are your current positive strengths, right? What are the current habits and traits that you have that actually align with this future version that you want to be? And what are maybe the things that don't align as much, okay? And remember, just because you have them now, it doesn't mean that they're going to define you, but be honest because this is where we're going to start making changes. You want to compare what matches and what doesn't. So put these things side by side. What traits do you already have? right, that align with the future you, and then what traits need to shift a little bit. And these mismatches are where the transformation is going to begin. And the first way that we're going to do that is by changing the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. In our brain, we have a filtering system. It's the reticular activating system. It goes through the hundreds of thousands of inputs that come into your brain and only really let you focus on the ones that are most important. It finds things that are related to what you are telling it. So, for example, if your story right now, your life story is, I'm not enough, nobody wants me, my partner hates me, they're going to leave me, my anxiety will never get better. Okay, your brain is going to look for things in your environment, for anything that's coming in. And as soon as it finds something that fits with this story, that fits with all the narratives you're telling yourself, it's going to present it to you in this nice shiny platter and say, hey, look, aren't you so proud of me? Look what I found. Look, I found something. I found something that really aligns with what you were thinking earlier today. I would get into these really anxious spirals. And as soon as my partner would shift something, I would think, oh my God, like they clearly don't want to be with me. And any little thing that their behavior would do, my reticular activating system would pick that up. So, for example, if they decided that they wanted to go out one day with their friends, my reticular activating system would like sound all the alarms and be like, look, this is the evidence that you're looking for. They're already starting to leave you because they want to hang out with their friends. Living like that is extremely exhausting. So, what we want to do, this is similar to what we're doing with the core beliefs. When we catch those negative self statements coming up, we need to literally stop them in their tracks. Think about it as like a little cloud. Okay. Here's your thought. It's a cloud. And here it is. The cloud's passing through your brain. It's over here. Okay. It's right above you. It's hovering above you. You need to literally reach out and push it away and say, listen, nice try, but that's not who I am anymore. Nice try, but that's just the old story. You can watch the cloud pass you by and you're just there, you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, cool. It's just a little reminder from the past, but that is not me anymore. That's not me. It's gotten so bad for me at some points where I would literally have to tell myself, stop or shut the F up. Okay. Because my brain is just not stopping to think about these negative things as they're coming up. So I would literally just say to myself, stop. This isn't true. This is the old story. And that's where you create the new story. The way that I started doing that is by deciding new traits that are going to be part of me. So this felt a little weird at first, but this is literally how I did it. I wanted to really work on my self concept, the way that I saw myself in the world. Okay. What I did was I went on my notes app, right? And I wrote a list of every single good trait I thought I have. And honestly, it was a pretty substantial list. Okay. The problem is the negative traits I thought I had felt so overpowering to this positive list. I deleted the negative traits list and I focused on a couple things in this list that would make me feel better about myself and about my relationship. So, like, and I chose a couple affirmations like, everybody loves me so easily. Okay. Love comes to me naturally. My partners are devoted to me. A couple of things like that that I really felt confident about. What I would do is I went on YouTube and there's this woman that makes these rampage videos where it's basically like a constant repetition of affirmations. Okay. Her name's High Frequency Guru. And there's this one that every single morning when I would wake up for 10 minutes straight, I'm looping it. It was this self concept rampage. Okay. And at night, I would loop other ones. After changing my core beliefs a little bit, taking those aligned actions that made sense with me, and then stopping my negative beliefs in their tracks and basically pushing them away, really focusing on these positive ones, my brain almost had no choice but to accept these beliefs as being true. It almost had no choice but to conform to the things that I was saying to it, right? Because now I'm telling myself a new story. I'm telling myself that I love myself. I'm telling myself that I'm safe, that I'm amazing, that everyone wants to be with me, and like no matter what happens in my life, I'm gonna be okay. And anytime that old version of me came back, and oh, she came back so many times, she was clawing at me all the time, I would literally have to just gently say to her, listen, I understand you, but right now, there's no space for you here. Over time, the repetition will change your beliefs. The beliefs will change your behavior, and your behavior will give you the results that you want of that identity shift. Okay. What you need to know though is that you need to actually act as a future you, right? This is the behavioral alignment. Your identity becomes real through action, right? It's not perfection. Let me give you an example, right? I made a decision. I wanted to be a very secure woman in my life and in my relationships. I wanted to be a very successful businesswoman, an amazing therapist, an amazing future wife, girlfriend, whatever, who was very secure, who was very calm, very confident, someone that people gravitated towards, someone who was very magnetic, someone who people would look at, and I enter a room and the room like lights up. That's what I wanted to be. So it's kind of like how we identified in the first few steps. Like, what would this person actually be doing? In my case, I know every day I'd be waking up and working towards my goals and my dreams, which means investing time in my business, which means investing time in my health. Going to the gym, eating healthier, eating well. If I'm partaking in any romantic relationships, this means going into it with a very clear mind and with not those limiting beliefs and assumptions that I had about men. Another thing I want to mention about core beliefs is these don't have to just be about you. These can also be about the world, right? For me, I had very negative beliefs about men. because of my experiences. I had to go through all of them and do this process too, because I didn't want to go into future relationships and connections thinking so negatively about the people that I'm going to be connected with. It's just not going to help me, right? I wanted to go into it with a very fresh and clear head and just let men be who they are and me decide for myself after looking at their behaviors and their actions and their words if they align with what I want or if they don't, right? Rather than going into it thinking, oh, this guy's obviously going to play me, or, this guy's obviously a player or a cheater, or he's going to treat me like shit. Like in this behavioral alignment, it looked like doing those little micro things, right? This was literally my daily routine for so long when I was going through this entire process, wake up every day, listen to my rampage, say my affirmations to myself, get up, make my bed, make a healthy breakfast, go to the gym, do all the work that I needed to do for the day, go see my friends, go out on the weekends. And I did start dating again. I would try to just really embody the traits that I wanted, That aspiring woman that I wanted to be was very calm, very feminine, very confident. She was never needy. She was never desperate. She was always going into something with a very level head. So I would slowly make sure that my actions that I was choosing to do were aligned with that. And this is a trial and error process. I failed so many times doing this in so many different ways, but what's important is that you just keep going. Okay. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you stop. You keep going. And that's why it's so important. Step 9, you need to stop negotiating with yourself, right? Your old identity is going to resist because it prefers comfort. When we learn something, when our nervous system has been stuck in one way for so long, it is very hard and scary to change, right? It's kind of like I mentioned, we're stuck in that liminal, like, okay, sure, we've just completely eradicated an old version of us. Now what? Now what do we do, right? Even while we're starting to work towards that new version, the old version is going to come back and it's going to say, hey, do you remember me? Hey, how come you're not paying attention to me anymore? Because it's a sense of comfort. And that's why a lot of people, they really struggle with change, not because they don't want to get to the new place, but it's because it feels different. Your body literally feels scared. And when you're going through this entire process, like you may get so anxious at times, right? Because of all the changes that you're going into. But you have to understand that this resistance is normal and the resistance means that you're doing the work, right? When it shows up, this is what I would say, like this is just discomfort. It's not a sign to stop. My future self wouldn't negotiate with this because the goal is to get to a point where that past version of you, you can look at it and you can revisit it and you can hug it. And you look at that past version, you can be so sweet and understanding of it, but you never let it get in the way of where you're going, right? You can let it stay there in the past where it needs to, and sure, maybe here and there you can go and revisit it and talk to that past version of you, but it doesn't get in the way of the future version that you want to build. You know that future version of you wouldn't negotiate. You're not going to negotiate with yourself if you should go to the gym because you know that you should. You're not going to go negotiate with yourself if you should communicate your needs because you know that you should. The more consistent that you can be with your identity, faster it actually stabilizes. Okay. The last thing is to reinforce the new identity daily. So this is kind of like I said, like I created a daily routine for myself that helped me really shift into the person that I wanted to be. And notice how majority of the things I was doing were not even at all connected to a relationship or to another person. And I think that's a very important thing. When I was going through this process, I kind of realized I don't even want anyone near me. Like I don't want a relationship at this point. I don't feel ready for that because I was changing so much about me and I needed to take some time away to learn. But at the same time, because I felt so much better in who I was, I recognized like I don't need to get that assurance or approval or validation from someone else. I have so much of it from myself. Unless someone's coming to my life and adding so much beauty and calmness and peace and excitement to it, what's the point to have them there, right? And that's why I say while you go through this healing process, you may realize that you don't want to be in your relationship or you don't want to be with your partner. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. That can actually be just the step that you need in order to make the biggest change of your life. Now that we have changed our core beliefs, we've shifted our identity, the next thing is to really work on our emotional flexibility. And this means that learning to notice our feelings without assuming that they're dangerous or permanent. So for me, when I would be in the depths of my anxiety or my negative emotions, I would sometimes sit there and be like, oh my God, like this is it. Like this is so bad. I don't think there's any coming back from this. But emotional flexibility is being able to recognize, okay, right now I'm feeling very overwhelmed, or right now I'm feeling very scared, but this feeling is going to pass, right? An emotion actually only really lasts for 30 seconds, like the height of it. The rest of it is just us ruminating about the emotion, right? So you feel fear for 90 seconds, you feel that anxiety for 90 seconds, you feel whatever, even happiness for 90 seconds. The rest is just a rumination, right? If I can just get through those 90 seconds and then I can try my best to regulate after that, I won't be so stuck in this thought process of thinking about the negative emotion over and over and over. And obviously, it's so much easier said than done. Note, but the goal is to not eliminate negative emotions. It's to recognize that they're normal, that they're going to come up here and there, and that you have the tools in place to manage. One of the most important things is the tolerance for uncertainty. And it's tricky for me to really explain this. The tolerance for uncertainty teaches your nervous system that not knowing it isn't the same as being abandoned, right? So we think like, okay, us not knowing if our partner's going to respond to us or not, okay, they're abandoning us. Us not knowing if they're going to hang out with us tomorrow means they're abandoning us. Us not knowing if they're going to show up for us means that abandoning us. No. This is how I like to view uncertainty now. If you can sit there and think in the absolute most negative way against yourself, then you can sit there and think in the most positive way, right? Why are you already having mental battles of things that haven't even happened yet? Why are you having mental arguments? Why are you jumping to the worst conclusion possible? By recognizing that your brain is doing this and engaging in these very distorted thought processes, you can almost fight against it, okay? Because in life, a lot of what we do is just a fight against ourselves. We are our own biggest battle, our own biggest competitor. And if you can get yourself to a point where you can fight against your thoughts, essentially, get to a point where you can basically win against your brain, then you can do anything in this world. By being able to sit there and saying, okay, just because they haven't texted me back yet, that doesn't mean they're leaving me. It probably means that they're just busy right now. Just because they canceled tomorrow's plan doesn't mean that they don't want to see me. It probably means that something came up and they're going to reschedule. Just because, they might need a little bit of space doesn't mean they're going to leave me. It probably means that they're going through a hard time and they just need to think a little bit. Phase five is integration, where we really want to learn secure communication. We want to practice emotional flexibility and really build tolerance for uncertainty. Okay. With secure communication, this is practicing to speak to your partner from a space of security while still advocating for your needs. Okay. So I created this little guide of how you're going to do this. Before you talk to them, you really want to check in with yourself, right? Like, what am I feeling right now before I'm going to have this conversation? And what is underneath this feeling? So, for example, let's say you're feeling very angry, right? What is underneath the anger? Maybe you asked for reassurance and you didn't get it, and you're just so angry right now. So, that is the thing. I need reassurance. I'm not feeling confident because they're not giving it to me. I'm feeling angry. Okay. What is your goal in this communication? Think about it here. In this, with our example here, let's say it's to understand something and to feel closer. You need that. You feel like you need that reassurance because you want to feel closer to your partner. You've been feeling distant from them, and it's leading to all this anger. This is your secure communication formula. Okay. You want to keep this as factual as possible when you're doing step one, naming the situation, right? Just the facts, don't interpret anything. When I showed you this photo of me and I asked you about my dress and what you thought about it, you just shrugged it off. Okay. This is the situation. This is what happened, right? Then share your internal experience. And you're going to do this from I statements. I feel this because that. I felt hurt because I was looking for connection. And that's why I wanted to show you the dress. But it seemed like you shrugged it off a little bit. See how I'm talking right now? Very calm, very gentle, in a very non accusatory way, because this is what helps with secure connection, right? So you want to express your doable need. Okay. It would really help me if at times where maybe I'm looking for a little bit of reassurance, you could maybe give me a positive word of encouragement. Maybe you could give me a compliment, something that might brighten my day. Okay. So, I need reassurance just for the moment. I need to know what your intention is. I need us to focus on one issue at a time. These are just some examples of what you could do. So once again, you're telling the situation from a factual thing, you're sharing your experience, and you're expressing your very clear and durable need. Now, this can be very scary to do. And oh my God, I have felt myself asking someone for something and just shaking, shaking, shaking and feeling so scared. But the key is just to slow down, put your hand on your chest, just stay steady, relax your shoulders, and just take a little breath, right? I'm safe. I can speak clearly, even kind of use a certain phrase like, hey, like, there's something that's on my mind that's really bothering me right now. Like, do you have a moment that we could talk about it? Or, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Like, can we take a little pause? One thing that I would do that would be such a common mistake is anytime that I was feeling overwhelmed and I wanted to really get to the bottom of something, I would have to do it right then, right now, in that moment, no matter what my partner was going through. I didn't care. Oh, you just came home from a 13-hour workday and you're so stressed out because your boss is like, telling you that the project you worked on is garbage. Oh, I don't care. Guess what? My reassurance is more important right now. Okay. Oh, we just had this incredibly large fight and you told me that you need space. Oh, I don't care about your space. I need to have this conversation right now. So you need to be a little bit mindful too, right? Like, pick a time where both of you are at a very good, relaxed state to have this type of conversation, right? I care about us. I care about your perspective. Can we talk about something? After that, you can reflect. What went well? What felt kind of hard to do? Did you communicate what you actually wanted? And then what are you going to try next time? Now, control. It's hard for me to explain what this would look like from a scientific kind of standpoint. But what we need to know is that letting go of control is your ultimate way to let go of anxiety. And I look at letting go of control as mastering the art of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean not feeling emotions, it means not letting emotions run your life. Okay. It's kind of like what I said here in that emotional flexibility, understanding that things will ebb and flow, but they do not impact you and the decisions that you make. It's being able to take a step back, not acting from an emotional standpoint. For me, it's actually gotten to a point where it's more than that, where I don't feel a lot of the negative things that I did before because I have let go of so much control. I have got to a point where I trust myself completely. So the way I see it is this: we want control over situations because we lack trust in ourselves. If we know how a situation is going to go, then we can predict the actions that we need to take, or the things that we need to do to make sure it works out for us. When we don't have control, when we have no idea what's going to happen, when we are so uncertain about the future, we can't predict what we're going to need to do in order to be safe, right? But it also means that we don't trust ourselves to make the right decisions or do the right thing. It's kind of like how before you go into a job interview, you feel so anxious because you don't know if you're going to say the right question, the right answers in order to win them over, right? It's the same thing how you are so nervous for having a conversation with your partner because you don't know if you're going to say the right things in order to get them to understand your side. And even worse, you don't know that if they don't understand your side and they decide to leave you, you don't trust that you're going to be able to manage that. So for me, a lot of things happened this year that were out of my control. There was a couple deaths in my family, there was sickness, there was breakups, there was a lot of things going on that I had absolutely no control over. And it taught me to trust in myself because every single situation I went through, I got through. And what that means is that I can deal with it. I don't need to know what the outcome is. All I need to know is that I am resilient enough to deal with it. Okay. And the way that you build resilience is by going through difficult situations. While this guide is extremely exhaustive, extremely extensive, and I really do hope that you can use the tools in here to make drastic changes and strides in your healing, if you would like to work with me and do this on a one-on-one personalized process where we can actually look at your unique situation and I can give you a lot more insight and depth and guidance, you can book a free 15-minute consultation with me and we can discover a little bit more about what it is that you're looking for and to see if we'd be a good fit. My website at liminalmindtherapy.ca, and then go to my service page and from there book a consult, or you can email me at ellenathetherapist@gmail.com, and let's really unlearn these patterns together. And I just want to give a big and massive thank you to everyone who watched this lecture. I really do wish you the absolute best. Like, I know that you can get to this point where you're calm, you're confident, you're secure, you feel the weight of your past melting away and not gripping on you so tightly, where you can become the new most amazing version of yourself. I know you can get there, and this is the first step. So thank you so much for watching everything that you did today. I really hope it helped you. I really hope you learned something from it, and I'll keep making more videos about this. In the next series, we'll talk about avoidant attachment and also its relation with anxious attachment. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best.